service, I always say service to the pastor, the forum tonight anyway. Also, if you have any questions, we'll ask you to hold those questions until the end. As you know, and probably know, our country's in trouble. Can I get an amen from the congregation? We've seen some things changing in America over the last 7 years that have I never thought I would see in America, and it's happening quicker and quicker and quicker all the time. And we, as a group, have recognized that. Let me just tell you a little bit how this forum came about. There's a number of groups involved in this. Now, this group is not affiliated with New York Revolution. It's not really affiliated with the Scope. It's not affiliated with Calvary Baptist Church. It's really a separate entity. But there are people that have come out of those particular groups. We've come together like-minded. We've seen these things happen in America, and we wanted to do something in our meetings, whether it was a church meeting, or whether it was a Scope meeting, or a New York Revolution meeting, or a Three Percenters meeting. We're seeing a lot of older folks and not a lot of young people. I'm glad to see these young folks over here tonight. A couple of our young guys over here being here tonight. And we were trying to get this message out of what's happening in the country. And we came to the conclusion, we just kept telling the same people that were on board over and over again, and we needed to get into some different venues and to try and educate people who may not ever hear this particular message. So that was kind of the genesis of the project. We got together last March, we discussed the different areas we'd like to talk about. We have a financial area, a faith area, a constitutional area tonight, and then there will also be a discussion on sacrifices that have been paid. We want you to be alert. We want you to be attentive. We want you to, if you're a praying person, pray that the Lord would open your heart to what's going on in this forum, and as far as the education is what we're trying to get across to you. Our intent is to educate you. Our intent is to get you to see what used to be, what the founder's intent was, things that have been paid on your behalf to get you the freedom you have, and to awaken you and stir you back to what you ought to be doing in relationship to the gifts that have been given to you. So, with that, let me run down the list of speakers tonight, and we are so thankful. None of us are really, I guess I'm kind of a professional, but I don't call myself a professional. As I said, I'm the pastor here of Calvary, and I'm thankful. You might ask, why does a pastor want to be involved in a Second Amendment Second Amendment group, or why does he want to be involved in getting back to educating for the Constitution? How many of you know that the Second Amendment, of the Bill of Rights, is the hinge pin of all the other ones? If the Second Amendment goes, you can count on your First Amendment going. I'd rather fight on the Second Amendment level and before I have to fight on the First Amendment, the freedom of speech, the freedom of religion issue. So I'm pro-Constitution, I'm pro-Bible, I'm pro-faith, I'm pro-getting back to where we ought to be in our country. Bill Fox, he's a contractor, a local contractor, a father, a granddad out in Leroy. He is the president of our local Scope chapter, self-employed in business for over 30 years, and we're glad to have him on board. Mandy Zarpentine is up here front. She's the state coordinator with New York Revolution. That is a grassroots organization. It's the purpose of waking up Americans to the reality of, it says here, of our civil liberties. But I want to say more to what was becoming the loss of our civil liberties. She's very, very active politically. She travels all across the state, talking and encouraging people to get on board with this type of a thing for the Second Amendment and for our religious and our other liberties. John Ariola is to my right. He will be doing our financial part tonight. John, you're independent, right, with your own company, Aegeus. He is a financial consultant, 28 years. 26 years. He's been in the financial market, advising people how to retain their income, retain their wealth. And he has done a metamorphosis from what he was taught in financial school to come to realize some things that are happening in the country with the finances. And his section is going to enlighten you. It really is. I've been on board with it for quite a while. I don't know as intensively as John does, but John does a real good job with that. We have some other folks on board. Carrie Dixon is with, what's your organization here? What organization are you with? And so Mike Wolford, Urban League, Buffalo Urban League, Conservative Urban League. No work. He's a superhero. He's a superhero. We have this young fellow right here, Carl Hyde. He is the what do you call it, superintendent of Bethany now, town supervisor, his wife May, we're thankful for that. Sean, you're with 3 Percenters? NYR, and this is his wife Kathy. We're thankful for that. Where's Joe? He's sitting around here someplace. Joe's right there, Joe Messer. What organization are you with also?
Second Amendment Coalition.
Amen. Praise the Lord. And Nick Gordelli right there next to you. And we're thankful for us. We've kind of been working on this. And Winston Platt, he's the pastor of the First Baptist Church in Warsaw, New York. We're kind of the faith guys on this whole thing. And so without further ado, let's get started tonight. Again, big live stream. And, oh, we got to do that, right. Man, oh man, shoot. Let's stand over to the pledge of the flag and let me pray to get started. They're looking at me like, what is wrong with you, preacher? Now listen, there's no comment in one nation under God. No comment in one nation under God. Let's pledge the flag. Ready? Begin. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let's pray. Lord, thanks for the evening and blessing. And Father, we do thank you for this opportunity tonight. We are concerned about the country you've given us. We're concerned about where our civil liberties are going. We're concerned about the way the thing is headed, with the liberties going away so quickly, Father. As we go through the program tonight, we ask you to bless each and every speaker. Help us to be articulate. Help us to be succinct in what we're trying to teach. Help us to say the things we shouldn't, leave out the things we shouldn't say, Father. And bless the folks that are here. Thank you for them coming, spending their night with us. We pray, Father, that as they sit here, their hearts will be open, their minds will be alert, and they learn something, Father, of where they've come from. Not what they've been taught in school, Father, not the history or the social studies they've been taught in the public or the government school, Father, but they realize the true history, the true sacrifice, the true things that the government is doing in our country today. Now we just ask you to bless our night, give the praise for it in Jesus' name. Amen. Without further ado, you may be seated. John Ariola, please.
Hi everyone, as Pastor said, my name is John Ariola. I'm an owner of a financial advising firm, and very few people can tell you what the cause of the financial crisis that began in 2007 was, and that we are still in today. They use words like quantitative easing and macroprudential policy. Are those words used to help you understand, or are these words used to help them hide their actions? If we followed the Constitution, we would never have had a financial crisis. We'd like to show you how far we've come from that original vision. To explain it, it's easiest to start at the beginning. So I have some quotes. It's well enough that people of the nation do not understand our banking and monetary system, for if they did, I believe there would be a revolution before morning. It's a quote from Henry Ford. No state shall coin money, emit bills of credit, make anything but gold and silver coin a tender in payment of debts. That's straight out of the U.S. Constitution. And I'd like to highlight that that's Article 1 of the Constitution, not Article 2, not Article 3. This is some of the most important stuff our founders felt belonged at the founding of the country. So these are some recent headlines. Greece needs further debt relief after a third bailout deal. You can let me read them, I guess. Putin says dump the dollar. What does all of this mean? So the easiest place to start is at the beginning. Before there was money, what we used to do with each other was barter. But there's a problem with barter. If I grow chickens, you build homes, we would have to wait for me to have 100,000 chickens before I could go purchase a home, right? And I may never find a home builder who wants that many chickens ever. And so what happened over time is people settled on a medium of exchange. I could sell my chickens and save money until I had enough built up to be able to go buy that home. What has been used as that medium of exchange throughout history? In Africa to this day, you can find cattle and sheep used as money. Before the founding of the United States, the trappers and traders used to use beaver pelts as money. There's an interesting instance in England where they used sticks as money. What would happen is you had a stick that would be notched, and each notch was a credit in payment of taxes to the government. This is used in England. They would split the stick down the center, give you half, and the government kept half. And you could actually use that credit to go purchase items. I had already paid taxes to the government, that stick could be used as your credit. You could always go back to the government and claim that. We all know the instance of seashells, wampum, land. I'll talk to you a little bit about that later. There was an instance where France used land as money. POWs use cigarettes as money. Gold and silver are what have been returned to time and time again throughout history. It doesn't matter the country, it doesn't matter the culture, it doesn't matter the time in history, but people have gone back to using gold and silver as their money at all points in history. Fiat is what we have today. Fiat is Latin for let it be. The money that we have right now only has value because the government says it has value. Nothing backs your dollars. I hear people all the time that incorrectly think that our dollars are still backed by gold. They're not. Bitcoin, I'd almost like to see a show of hands if anybody knows what Bitcoin is. Okay, so some people have heard of it. Bitcoin is a cryptocurrency, a computer currency. And Bitcoin can only grow at a rate of 3% per year. Bitcoin is a reaction to all of the money printing. You guys all realize that quantitative easing is money printing? That would be the plain English language version of it. Bitcoin is a reaction to that. It only grows at the rate of 3% per year. If you try to hack into it, you blow up your money. So what would happen is people had gold as their money. They would go deposit that gold into the bank, and they would get a receipt for their gold. And if I wanted to go buy a house, what I would do is I would take my receipts back to the bank, whoever it was that issued that currency, that receipt. I would get the gold and then go buy a house. And over time, people came to understand that the receipt was as good as the gold. Except that the bankers kind of ruined the math. What they would do is instead of giving out one receipt at interest, they would give out 2 receipts at interest for every ounce of gold that they had in the bank vault. They were safe. They gave out 3. They were safe. They gave out 5. They were safe. There was always, if you think about yourselves, how often do you clean out every last dollar out of your bank account? Probably never, right? And you multiply that times 300 million people, and you can see how there's almost always some money in the bank. The idea that the bank would be entirely emptied out almost never comes to fruition. What happened is they got to a point of where they would have lend out 10 receipts for every ounce of gold, and they were still safe. At 11 or 12, someone would come in with a receipt, they would want their gold, and there would be no gold in the vault. And what would happen is you would have a run on the bank. Everyone knows it's a Wonderful Life, and George is back behind the counter, and people all want their money, and he's pointing, it's in Mary's house, and it's in Joe's house. There is a certain point of time where there just is no money in the bank, and the way our system has evolved here in the United States, it's called a fractional reserve banking system. There is $1 in reserves for every $10 in loans. If you are the person that wants your money out of the bank, you better be number 1 out of 10 in line. Because if you're number 2 out of 10 in line, the money's not there. Something most people don't understand about our banking system. Governments get in on the action as well. What happens, this is a coin from Greece. It's a gold coin. This coin used to be round. What happened is as the coin goes through the treasury, the government shaves off a little bit from the outside and then puts the coins back into circulation. And then they melt down the shavings and create new coins out of that. But over time, you can see the coin is no longer round. It doesn't have even the same weight it used to have, right? And so when you go to the merchant to buy your chickens or your home, they would see these coins that are a little bit light in weight, and they would ask you for more coins. They wouldn't accept the original coin, the value of the original coin in trade. This is another example. Remember I said it doesn't matter the time in history or the culture? This is from ancient China. It's a Chinese coin, and when this coin went through the treasury, what the treasury would do is punch out the center as their stamp of approval. This is valid currency here in China. Put it back out into circulation. And oh, by the way, they had all the little center stamps available to melt down into new coins. So without the confidence factor, I have another quote here, without the confidence factor, many people believe a paper money system is liable to collapse eventually. This is right from the Federal Reserve Bank of Philadelphia's own pamphlet on gold. I won't ask for a show of hands. There is a history in the United States. Most people don't know that the banks in the United States created the currency. For most of the history of this country, what would happen is you would go deposit your gold, in this case at the Waltham Bank, in Waltham, Massachusetts. You would deposit your gold there, and you would get a receipt back for that gold. What happened is when we had those banking crises, people would show up for their gold and there wasn't enough gold there. There would be a run on the Waltham Bank. Every last person who was in there wanted their deposits out. And then, oh, by the way, if you heard the Waltham Bank was going broke, you might go to the bank next door and withdraw your money from them as well, right? So not only did you have banking crises, but you would have regional banking crises. That was all fine and good until the Federal Reserve, until the federal government got in on the act in 1913. The Federal Reserve was created in 1913. It was passed into law by President Woodrow Wilson. It was to provide relief from financial panics, unemployment, business depression, and to protect the public from the domination of what is known as the money trust. So first of all, I'd ask you to look at all the things the Federal Reserve was created for, and I would ask you what kind of a job the Federal Reserve has done. What was envisioned for the Federal Reserve is that if the Waltham Bank had a run on the bank, the Federal Reserve would always be there as the lender of last resort to any bank that got in trouble. And they would come in and ship enough gold in there from around the country to provide for whatever withdrawals were being requested from those banks. The problem is the Federal Reserve was created on the same model as the banks themselves. It had $1 in reserves for every $10 that it lent out to those banks. So your dollars, even though the Federal Reserve was created, the Federal Reserve all of a sudden started issuing money. Instead of Waltham Bank issuing currency, the Federal Reserve now issued the currency. But your dollars were always redeemable in gold and silver. Those points that are circled there, I'll show you what they say. At the top, what it says is this certifies that there have been deposited in the Treasury of the United States of America $10 in gold coin payable to the bearer on demand. So you could always go to your bank or to the Federal Reserve Bank of your area, your regional Federal Reserve Bank, and you could always request gold or silver for the currency that you held in your pocket. That was true until 1933. Most people that I talk to don't know that in 1933 the federal government confiscated all the gold held in the country. It was punishable by 10 years in prison. That's how major an offense they considered it, not minor. What would happen is when you went to your bank vault, to your bank, if they saw you going into the safe deposit boxes, a security guard would be waiting for you to go in. He would escort you in, make sure you were not depositing any gold into your safe deposit box and not withdrawing any. One piece that really slides by people, though, the Federal Reserve was created in 1913, right, as the lender of last resort to the banks. By 1933, the Federal Reserve did not have enough gold to back all the currency in circulation and had to go around the country and confiscate all the gold from the people of this country. 20 years. So during the Great Depression, and you'll notice this on your own dollar bills in your pocket, what you'll notice is that at the top it says Federal Reserve Note. And I would ask if any of you are on the hook for any notes. Auto notes, mortgage note. You understand what a note is? A note is a loan. What we hold in our pockets are loans from the Federal Reserve that we pay the Federal Reserve interest for. If you've ever heard the term the federal funds rate, that's what the federal funds rate is. The federal funds rate is the rate of interest that we pay to the Federal Reserve for the privilege of holding these dollars in our pocket. Bretton Woods. Bretton Woods is the monetary system that we live under now. It was created in 1945 after World War II. What happened is, at the end of World War II, Hitler was threatening France. France shipped all of its gold over to the United States. Hitler was threatening Britain. Great Britain shipped all of its gold over to the United States. The countries of Europe purchased all of their war material from the United States. They purchased it in gold. And so what happened is by the end of 1945, Europe and Asia were devastated, and all the gold resided here in the United States. And so in 1945, what happened is we created a monetary system where the world, think about this, we had just saved Europe, right? We had just saved Europe from Hitler. Everyone was very trusting of the United States. The world decided they would accept dollars in return as their reserve currency. Everywhere in the world, they accept dollars in trade. And the promise was that we would back those dollars with all the gold that was held under Fort Knox. Until this gentleman...
The third indispensable element in building the new prosperity is closely related to creating new jobs and halting inflation. We must protect the position of the American dollar as a pillar of monetary stability around the world. In the past 7 years, there's been an average of one international monetary crisis every year. Now, who gains from these crises? Not the working man, not the investor, not the real producers of wealth. The gainers are the international money speculators. Because they thrive on crises, they help to create them. In recent weeks, the speculators have been waging an all-out war on the American dollar. The strength of a nation's currency is based on the strength of that nation's economy. And the American economy is by far the strongest in the world. Accordingly, I have directed the Secretary of the Treasury to take the action necessary to defend the dollar against the speculators. I have directed Secretary Connally to suspend temporarily the convertibility of the dollar into gold or other reserve assets, except in amounts and conditions determined to be in the interest of monetary stability and in the best interest of the United States.
We've heard enough from him. So two things I would mention to you. That was in 1971 that Nixon took us off the gold standard. And I would highlight that he said temporarily suspend convertibility into gold. So as a financial advisor, I've been in the business 26 years. It took me until the financial crisis when the Federal Reserve started printing money like it's going out of style. It took me studying the Federal Reserve to come to understand any of this. The Federal Reserve, I was taught 26 years ago that the federal government has never defaulted on its debts. 1933, the federal government confiscated all gold held in the country. Is that a default on the holders of dollars? 1971, we had been promising throughout the entire monetary system, the Bretton Woods monetary system, to redeem dollars in gold to our trading partners overseas. Is that a default on our trading partners overseas? It was when Nixon, he has the nickname Tricky Dick, and so when he was talking about monetary speculators, there were people speculating on the dollar, but the truth of what happened was, after World War II, we accumulated a lot of debt. We were printing more dollars, we printed dollars to be able to pay off our debts. We were printing more dollars than we had in gold as reserves, and it was France. In 1965, Charles de Gaulle, imagine General Charles de Gaulle from France, after we had just gotten through saving France from Germany, from Hitler, right? Charles de Gaulle in 1965 started to admonish the United States for printing so much currency. He thought that it was irresponsible of us, that we were not being a good partner to our trading partners. And it was in 1971 that France said to the United States, "We don't think you have enough gold to back our dollars. We'd like our gold, thank you very much." And that was our president's response. So it was not just monetary speculators, it was our trading partners. What I would highlight, I can't go back here, it's like, yeah. Will it go back a couple? What I would highlight is ever since then, government spending, government borrowing, the price level in the United States. This is the gold fixing price. These charts look familiar to you? It was from 1971 that we delinked from gold. We had no reason that we couldn't print as many dollars as we wanted and borrow as much as we wanted, because nothing stopped us, held us back from doing that printing and borrowing. If the American people ever allow private banks to control the issue of their currency, first by inflation, then by deflation, the banks will deprive the people of all property until their children wake up homeless on the continent their fathers conquered. That's a quote from Thomas Jefferson. My favorite of the founders, by the way. This piece I threw in there because it's important for people to understand. This is the god Janus. The god Janus is what the month January is named after. He looks back to the old year, forward to the new year. What I want people to understand, he is two faces of the same being, and when you look at the banking, financial system, and the government of the United States, they are two faces of the same being. What's in the interest of the banks is what's in the interest of the government. What's in the interest of the government is what's in the interest of the banks. This was shocking to me to see. This is the history of prices in the United States going back to the year 1650. The periods in purple or blue are periods of inflation, and you can see the green is periods of deflation, falling prices. So what you had were rising prices followed by falling prices. And most of the really large ticks up there that you can see are wars. This one right here would be 1776, War of 1812, the Civil War, World War I. What you can see is we had an inflation in World War II, and never once again have you ever seen a deflationary episode in the United States. Never again have you seen falling prices. People don't understand that inflation is not the natural order of things. Inflation is created through money printing, through shaving off the outside of those coins, lightening them up. I found this one interesting, threw it in just for comparison. This is, the top price up here is the price of oil. This is oil priced in gold. If we still use gold as our money. The price of oil would never have risen had we still used gold as our money. This comes right from the Federal Reserve, their own charting service. The top blue line is the price in the United States. The red line, that's your income. So there are key points to this presentation. The first key point is that your currency is not money. Our currency was always a receipt for money. But it's more importantly even that people understand that money is not wealth. Even if we had gold as our money, right? You can't eat it, you can't live in it, you can't drive it around. Even gold is not your wealth. Gold is just something that has value that you can save to be able to purchase the things that you want and need later on in life. This is probably the most important part of, for people to absorb from this presentation is that wealth is in the process of being transferred right now. As money is being printed, wealth is being transferred. Who's it being transferred? It's being transferred from savers to spenders. You understand where interest rates are today, right? I'm not going to get into the technicals of how it's being done, but the Federal Reserve is manipulating interest rates low. If you're a saver, do you benefit from those actions? If you're a borrower, do you benefit from low interest rates? Yeah. The biggest of the borrowers being the U.S. government, right? It's being transferred from debtors to the banks as well. You all saw the financial crisis in 2008 and people being foreclosed on their homes, right? If you look at the physical things, the home as wealth, what happened to that wealth? It got transferred from an individual to a bank, right? Inflation is not the natural order of things. So Europe is back in the headlines again. What is going on in Europe and what does any of that have to do with us here in the United States? So what happened, I've talked about the fractional reserve banking system of the United States. $1 in deposits for every $10 out in loans. What happened when Europe was created in the early 2000s, the European Central Bank said to the European banking system, well, if you lend to a sovereign government, that's risk-free. You don't need to hold anything in reserve against those loans. Has anyone in here heard Deutsche Bank in the news this past week? I've been talking about it for years. Deutsche Bank is levered 50 to 1. Deutsche Bank has 2% deposits. If Deutsche Bank loses 2% of its deposits, it's wiped off the map. Credit Suisse and Credit Agricole have 3% deposits against their loans. They're levered 33 to 1. Can I ask you, do you understand now why they're fighting so hard to keep Greece in the euro? Why they're not allowing Greece to default? I think they may have put a firewall in place between the banks and Greece today, after years of Greece being in having problems, right? But I want you to understand why all these issues are keep popping up in Europe. Two things I would say is that Europe is ahead of the United States on this path, And the one that no one understands is that Japan is ahead of Europe on this path. And people don't understand, Japan, a couple weeks ago, you're gonna love this one, negative interest rates. So first of all, negative interest rates have been imposed in Europe already, but Japan 2 weeks ago decided they also would implement negative interest rates. I want you to think about that. What is the nature of a debt when you have to pay someone for the privilege of lending them money? You don't earn interest by lending them money. You pay them for lending them money. The Japanese government has been printing yen and buying, at this point, they currently buy every Japanese government bond that's issued. They have money left over to the point where right now they own 52% of the Japanese stock market through ETFs. If they wanted to do any further stimulus to try to get people to spend their money, they couldn't do it by buying any more government bonds, by buying any more stocks. The only thing they could do is penalize you for holding cash. So negative interest rates have gone to Europe. They're in Japan now, and my contention is that's what's headed our way eventually. Think about where interest rates in the United States are. Recessions are just normal things, right? Shouldn't be an emergency, but the Federal Reserve has got its foot on the gas all the way to the floor. What's going to be its response if there's a recession in the United States? And I'm just talking an average, everyday recession. What's happening is that history is repeating. This is a Roman coin called an Antonianus. This cache of coins was found at the bottom of the Mediterranean. You probably all know that silver and gold don't rust, right? The first coin here was minted in the year 240, had 40% silver in it. This is 250, 260, 270. So over the course of 30 years, look at the difference in the Roman coins. And a lot of people think that the debasement of the Roman currency is what caused the fall of Rome. There's a piece I'm going to add. This kind of new and worries me. We made a deal with Saudi Arabia in the 1950s when oil was found in Saudi Arabia. And the deal was this. We said, we will guarantee your security if you accept nothing but dollars in trade for oil. And that has been what has been the arrangement in the world since the 1950s. Our president just made a deal with Iran. I don't know how many of you guys know Iran and Saudi Arabia are mortal enemies, the Sunni and the Shia. Are we living up to our promise to Saudi Arabia for their security in making a deal with Iran for them to be able to have nuclear weapons? What happens, I'm going to add to that, Iran being the great, we made a great deal with them, right? They're now able to sell their oil. I don't know if any of you noticed, I pay a lot of attention to this now, obviously. Iran has said that they will not accept dollars in trade for oil. They only want euros for that oil. And we have stabbed Saudi Arabia in the back. Do you think Saudi Arabia we are no longer their largest purchaser of oil. Their largest purchaser of oil is China. Might they accept yuan, Chinese yuan, in trade for oil? You're watching things happen that to me are tectonic shifts. These are like the pressures that build up before an earthquake. And this is how it comes back to the United States. I mentioned Europe and their interest rates and the problems that they're having in their banking system. You may remember during the financial crisis in 2008, derivatives were a big problem. And if you haven't studied it, you won't understand why that was. What AIG, everyone knows AIG went bankrupt. What AIG basically did was sold insurance. They called these credit default swaps. You've probably all heard of municipal bonds. Municipal bonds are a loan to a municipality like the city of Batavia, County of Erie, New York State. Those are municipal bonds, and then you can buy an insured municipal bond. What happens is, if that municipality defaults on that loan from you, that default will be swapped with cash. The insurance company's telling you they'll give you cash instead of that defaulted bond. That's a credit default swap. So what I'd like you to see is what our banks have sold for insurance. This is JP Morgan's issuance of credit default swaps. This is what the entire world produces in a year. This is world GDP. Here's Citibank, Bank of America, Goldman Sachs. Our American banks sold the insurance on the defaults of European governments. And those are contractual obligations. I think they've tried to build some firewalls in. I'm pretty sure they have unwound a lot of their guarantees on Greek debt, but what about Portugal, Spain? Italy's numbers came in, and Italy is, I think, the third largest economy in Europe. Italy has 33% of its loans not being paid back by the people that borrowed the money. And when the money failed in the land of Egypt and in the land of Canaan, all the Egyptians came unto Joseph and said, give us bread, for why should we die in thy presence? For the money failed. What's happening right now is as old as history. If you know your history, you might avoid this. So the dangerous trends that are out there, we all know the banks were too big to fail. We couldn't let them fall. And what we've had happen since then is Merrill Lynch merged with Bank of America, Countrywide Bank merged with Bank of America, Morgan Stanley merged with Smith Barney, Wachovia with Wells Fargo, Bear Stearns and Washington Mutual with JP Morgan. All the banks that were too big to fail in 2007 are too bigger to fail today.
Right.
Quantitative easing continues across the globe. I mentioned money printing is being done in Europe and in Japan. We stopped printing money in October of 2014, and I want you to all pay attention. Since 2014, since October 2014, what's happened to the price of oil, the price of steel, the price of coal, the price of milk received by farmers, the Canadian dollar, the euro, the yen, everything the dollar would buy has fallen the minute the Federal Reserve stopped printing. We are in a war. What we are living in is a war between inflation and deflation. Deflation, falling prices like you're seeing with oil right now and with milk, copper, steel. This is the natural, where nature wants to take us. Inflation is what the Federal Reserve is trying unsuccessfully to create. You're seeing, when we print, we lower the value of the dollar, right? That's how these prices rise. The dollar buys less and less stuff. What we're seeing is when we lower the value of our dollars become cheaper for foreigners to buy, and they're forced to lower their currency as well. And this is called competitive devaluation. So one country doing it forces other countries to do it. This, the very bottom one, total debt issuance. How many people think we have become more responsible in our borrowing since 2007? Total debt issuance, I just got the number today, just updated this chart. Total debt issuance today is up $57 trillion since 2007. That's as of mid last year. We have seen the fall of European elected governments in Greece, Spain, Italy, Portugal, Romania, Holland, and France. And one thing I'd really like to point out, I mentioned the fall of Rome, right? A couple of these countries here, Greece and Italy, didn't get to elect their new leaders. Their new leaders were appointed by the European Commission. You think we live in democracy? That's freedom. We're seeing liquidity events in European banks. So I gotta say, I've had that piece up there for going on 6 years now. And this week, Deutsche Bank was just targeted. A lot of people think they don't have the money to pay their dividend. We're seeing downgrades of European sovereign debt. We're seeing capital flight from peripheral countries to Northern Europe and armed conflicts. There's a piece of, I'm not going to get into it. There's a fairly recent armed conflict that I could point to the Federal Reserve on, but in the interest of time, I'm going to get past that. So another quote, a private central bank issuing the public currency is a greater menace to the liberties of the people than a standing army. We must not let our rulers load us with perpetual debt. It's another quote from Thomas Jefferson. So why was Thomas Jefferson so concerned with this issue that I have multiple quotes up here from him? And I could pull a bunch more. At the time we signed the Declaration of Independence, we were fighting the Revolution. In the 1780s, 1790s, Thomas Jefferson was our ambassador to France. And you remember I said I was going to tell you a little story about France using land as money? Well, it was after the Revolution here in the United States that France decided to use land as money. What France did was they decided to finance the exploration of Louisiana, of the Mississippi River Valley, by issuing paper stock against that land. So the stock was redeemable for land here in the New World. This, you have to think about this. The Mississippi River Valley is where all the trade in the New World should be going through. And oh, by the way, France owns New Orleans, right at the head of that river valley, right? All trade has to go through French possession. So any wealth that's exported out of the New World has to go through French rivers and French port city. Sounds like a pretty good investment story, right? So the French people start buying issues of that land. Sold out. French government sees how popular it is, they issue more of that stock. People know if they want to go buy a house, they could use that stock to go buy a house. And there's such demand for that stock of money that they just are able to continually print it. Well, someone comes back from the New World, and you know, we really haven't found gold there yet, and the trade, a little slower than we expected. You know, they're still using the port of Boston, the port of Charleston, not using, you know, there are a lot of Indians in the Mississippi River Valley. It's a dangerous place for us to ship goods from. And oh, by the way, New Orleans is underwater. Well, once the selling began, you ended up with a collapse of the French economy. We all know Marie Antoinette let them eat cake, right? We all know guillotines in the streets of Paris. And what I want people to think about is, so you have a currency that's being printed like it's going out of style. You end up with a collapse of that currency and the economy, which leads to a depression, which leads to a dictator named Napoleon and war throughout Europe. I want you to think about the German example. I don't use the German example because it's so well known, right? Everybody already knows wheelbarrow was full of money to go buy a loaf of bread in Germany prior to World War II. But I want you to think of the chain of events. Germany's held liable for all the debts from World War I. They print their currency to pay those debts, and there's nothing backing the currency. They print their currency until there's a collapse of the German economy in the 1920s, which leads to the dictator Hitler and war throughout Europe. Think about the path we're on. This is the total, since 1929, the red line is the total credit market in the United States. I use the total credit market because whether the federal government borrows money, or your county borrows money, or your state borrows money, it's you that pays that debt, right? So this is the total credit market compared to GDP. Total credit market in red, total our production in blue. That is the gap that needs to be fixed. The amount that we've borrowed in excess of what we've produced. And that little red circle up there is the 2008 global financial crisis. That's the great deleveraging that we went through to fix our debt problem. So in summary, what we have is a fiat currency system which is backed by nothing but full faith and credit, and that is an experiment that is 40 years old, started in 1971. Our currency system has been adopted by all countries. Every country in the globe backs their currency with nothing, has the ability to print in perpetuity. We're in an overall environment of debt deleveraging. We need to pay off our debts and prices should be falling. That's the overall environment the country's in. Historically, these debt deleveragings last 20 plus years. We're in year number 7 now, right? And the big thing that I need people to understand is that there is no precedent for where we currently find ourselves. There has never been a time where every country across the globe has been able to print its money with nothing backing it. There was always somewhere else to go. If Germany was being irresponsible with their currency, you could always move your money over to England or to the United States. Where do you go now? What can you do? So I'm going to give you all a note. My business cards are outside. This is a presentation on politics. It's not a presentation on finance. But you can imagine this has a heavy impact on your finances. I don't get into a lot of the finances here. I don't want to get into investment implications. Everyone's different. I can't give financial advice to a room full of people, right? If any of you want to know that piece, my cards are available out on the front table. What you can do is stop feeding the system. You can save your money You can maybe own a little bit of gold. You can stop living on debt to try to finance your standard of living. Educate yourself. The pieces that I've given you here, I've given you 45 minutes. And I have to tell you, I've been studying this for years, and every week there's something new that pops up. It's important that you educate yourself on these subjects. It's important that you hold your lawmakers accountable. So during times of turmoil, your voice needs to be loud and persistent. There's a reason I say this. If I mentioned that every country in the globe is printing its money and has nothing backing its currency, right? Our founders understood that a gold standard was a check on out-of-control government spending, out-of-control government borrowing. Do you think the governments will give up that power? What's the next step? The next step, and this is where it gets biblical, the next step is to have a global world reserve currency backed by nothing that they can print in perpetuity. If you understand that a fiat currency is the cause of this mess, then you won't allow a fiat currency to be the solution to this mess. Be the change you wish to see. This is about you personally. Look, I do things with my clients every day that is not in the interest of my own business. I tell them to buy gold. That means they have less money to invest with me. I tell them to go out and get themselves out of debt. That means they have less money to invest with me, right? If deflation, falling prices hit, if you have your debts paid off, you don't have a large mortgage on your house, do you care if the price of your house falls? You're able to live in your house anyway, right? You keep that wealth. Try to keep yourselves out of debt. It's probably the single biggest thing you can do. And the solutions are not in Republican or Democrat. The solutions are in we the people. This is about all of us. Thank y'all. We'll be back for questions later.
Now that John has you wanting to jump out of a 10-story window. That section, that section is pretty important. It sets up the rest of our presentation this evening. I want to talk a little bit about the faith of the Founding Fathers and some things that are going on. Brian, could you look that first quote for me, if you would, please? I want you to read this quote. I want you to read it slowly. When you get done reading it the first time, I'd like you to take a moment and read it a second time. When you get done reading it a second time slowly, I want you to read it a third time and just kind of let it sink in. Let's see who said this quote. Isn't that frightening? America is like a healthy body. Its resistance is threefold. It's patriotism, it's morality, it's spiritual life. If we can undermine these three areas, America will collapse from within. Our founding fathers were pretty wise in their foundational principles of forming our government. They said this in the opening of the Declaration of Independence, that when the course of human events is necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and nature's God entitle them, and decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they which should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. They said, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. And among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Now, I want you to note, too, that the founders, as they drew up that preamble to the Declaration, fought over that last part. They wanted to say life, liberty, and property. But they changed that because they thought that property was a natural thing for men to own, so they thought that they should put in there the pursuit of happiness. So if that's what the Founding Fathers said, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, let's talk a little bit about why they said these things were self-evident. Why were they self-evident? Number one, because rights come from God. I just read a piece on Facebook the other day. John Kennedy did a quote in his inaugural speech in 1961. He said that let's make sure that we understand that the rights of man do not come from the generosity of the state. but they come from God. Even a Democrat got that back in the 60s. We had yet been in this situation where we still had the right thinking. Scripture tells us what these rights are. Life, it tells us in Genesis that so God created man in his own image. In the image of God created him. Male and female created he them. He goes on to say that in Genesis 9, that surely your blood of your lives will I require, at the hand of every beast will I require, and at the hand of a man, at the hand of every man's brother will I require the life of a man. Who shall sheddeth man's blood? By man shall his blood be shed. For in the image of God, man he made. Exodus, where the Ten Commandments are, the Ten Commandments say this, thou shalt not kill. Now, please bear with me a minute. There's a difference. That word, and I don't really like to say the King James Version has not been translated properly, but that word kill in there is really murder. Thou shalt not murder, because if it meant thou shalt not kill, God was a hypocrite. God sent the Israelites into the promised land. He said, kill the Hittites and the Jebusites and the Perizzites and clean them all out. He said, go ahead and kill them. But he said, in these verses, do not murder. He goes on and talks about property in Genesis chapter 1. He says, and God blessed them. And God said to them, be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth and subdue it. And have dominion over the fish of the sea and over the fowl of the air and over everything that moveth upon the earth. And God said, behold, I have given you, let me repeat that, and I have given you every herb-bearing seed which is upon the face of all the earth, and every tree which the fruit of the tree yielding seed. To you it shall be for me. And then in the Ten Commandments again, he says this, thou shalt not steal. That gives the inclination that we own something. Don't take what's not yours. It's somebody else's. It's property. If you look at the Ten Commandments, the first 4 commandments have to do with our relationship with God. The last 6 commandments have to do with our relationship between man. Now, I've covered the life, and I've covered the property. Let me cover liberty for just a minute, if I could. We need to get a definition for liberty. Liberty is a very important concept. I hear all the time, I can do whatever I please. I hear all the time, I'm free to be me. No, but we have liberty. Liberty is doing is freedom, but doing it with a moral code behind it. We have a moral code. God has given us a moral code because God gave us the rights, gave us the moral code by which we get our liberty. It is this book. It is a spiritual matter. Very, very important. Because of this institution of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, we've seen great benefits in this country. This country is the most prosperous country on the face of the planet ever in history. It is a country that has done more for other countries of giving them aid, of supplying them with food, with medical assistance, than any other country ever, without ever expecting anything to come back. We've been a country of military conquest in other countries to help the downtrodden, to help those who are being oppressed. Not so that we could gain a territory, so we could cede or add on to us some more property. We did that to free the people from the oppression of the dictators, never expecting anything in return, which Donald Trump says, I make them pay. Be careful. And we're also a country that sent out more missionaries and had more religious events. I don't like to use that word religious, but we've sent the gospel around the world because of our generosity, more than any other country ever on the face of the planet. This liberty has given us some very, very important things. And from those 3 basic rights, these 3 basic things of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, all of our freedoms really have come. All the things we've enjoyed in America have come. And let me tell you a little bit about the Founding Fathers, if I could. These fellows were just mere mortal men. They were no different than Bill and I, or John and I, or any of the fellows sitting in this room. They put on their pants one leg at a time, just like we did. But they have been guided on 2 fronts as they headed down this. They knew the history of England. They knew the conquest of the king over the people. They knew the problems the king had given the people in England. And the 5 different charters that led up to where they are today in America. And they knew the scriptures. They knew the scriptures from their youth. At this time, in the 1700s, the First Great Awakening had been traveling across Europe. The Great Awakening was a revival of spiritual acuity. People were getting saved. They were getting right with God. They were getting their hearts in tune with Him. And that spiritual awakening jumped across what the Brits would call the pond and came to the east coast of America. And these fellas got it. They were in tune with the Bible. They were in tune with the God of the Bible. They knew Him succinctly. They knew Him personally. And the norm of the society in those days was to hold the truths of the Bible, whether you were spiritual or not, whether you were in church or not, whether you were carnal or not. They held those truths to be from God and to be the absolute authority and the basis for all life. Very, very important. We've come a long way from that today. Many of the precepts, many of the things that were debated as they wrote the Constitution, the founding documents, the Declaration of Independence, manifested the influence that these men had on their spiritual teaching. Very, very important. As a matter of fact, 24 of the 56 signers of the Declaration of Independence had seminary degrees. They were trained theologians. Did you know that Yale was started to train preacher boys? And Harvard was trained to train preacher boys? And all the Ivy League schools, Princeton, you name them, were formed to train preacher boys. They knew that. And they understood with all of their being that all rights came from God and that they were protected like that, and that they were going to have to protect men from the lust and the avarice of different men. Thomas Jefferson, John's favorite president, said this: God who gave us life gave us liberty. And can the liberties of a nation be thought secure when we have removed their only firm basis? A conviction in the minds of the people that these liberties are the gift of God. That they are not to be violated, but with His wrath. Indeed, I tremble for my country when I reflect that God is just, and that His justice cannot sleep forever. We're in trouble, folks. Now let me tell you about the Constitution. I read today, we all know that Judge Scalia passed away on Saturday evening. He was the staunchest constitutionalist on the board, on the bench. He was a man who was pro-Second Amendment, pro-life, pro-marriage, pro-America, pro-Constitution. He said this: the Constitution is not a living organism. It is a legal document. And it says what it says, and it doesn't say what it doesn't say. That was the legal mind that we had sitting on the bench in Washington on the Supreme Court. He was teaching one day at Southwest Methodist University and said that the Constitution is dead. Now, he meant that in a good way. It's not the living document that they think they talk about today. These people today want to you to believe that the Constitution is living, that it has to change to fit into the society that we live in. This book is written to the sinfulness of man. This book does not need to change. The founding fathers understood that the Constitution was written to protect the people from an overbearing government, to protect the rights of the people from the avarice, the greed, the power that men would accrue as they purported and pushed this government forward. That's the intent of the Constitution. It's not to make it good for all people, it's to protect the people. Very, very important. Charles Carroll said this, he was a signer of the Declaration: without morals, a republic cannot subsist any length of time. They, therefore, who are decrying the Christian religion, whose morality is so sublime and pure, and which ensures the good eternal happiness, and undermining the solid foundation of morals, the best security for the duration of free governments. They said, we better have Christianity in America. He knew that. Sammy Adams said this: he, therefore, is the truest friend of liberty of this country, who tries most to promote its virtue, and who, so far as his power and influence extend, will not suffer a man to be chosen in any office of power and trust who is not a wise and virtuous man. Does that sound like our president? The sum of all this is, if we would most truly enjoy the gift of heaven, let us become a virtuous person, or virtuous people. I don't know which one of the founders said it. I keep meaning to look it up. But one of the founders says, we have given you a great test, a great experiment. And this experiment we've handed you in this government can only work if people will govern themselves, which is mean you're a virtuous people. I should look that up sometime. John Adams went on to say, because power corrupts, society's demand for moral authority and character increases as the importance of the position increases. You ought to be willing to elect people of virtue. Sam Adams went on to say, if ever time should come when vain and aspiring men shall possess the highest seats in government, our country will stand in need of its experienced patriots to prevent its ruin. Do I have any experienced patriots in the room this evening? Think about that for a minute. The writers of the Constitution, in fact, because of their knowledge of man's sinfulness, they knew that they needed God to direct them. Needed God to direct our country. In order for this new country to be blessed, God needed to be recognized, He needed to be worshipped, He needed to be followed, it had to be in the hearts of the people. And what happened was it needed to be in the individual's hearts. Patrick Henry said this: "It cannot be emphasized too strongly or too often that this great nation was founded not by religionists, but by Christians. Not on religion, but on the gospel of Jesus Christ. For this very reason, people of other faiths have afforded silent prosperity, freedom, and worship here." In fact, many of these fellows gave testimony of their personal conversion, their personal acceptation of Christ as their Savior. Sam Adams said this in his will: "I recommend my soul to the Almighty Being, who gave it, and my body I commit to the dust, relying upon the merits of Jesus Christ and pardon for my sins." Charles Carroll, we quoted him one other time, said this: "On the mercy of my Redeemer, I rely for salvation and on His merits, not on the works that I have done, but obedience to His precepts, His merits." John Jay, first Justice of the Supreme Court, be praying for the justice that will take Scalia's place. He said this: "Unto Him who is the author and giver of good, I render sincere and humble thanks for His manifold and unmerited blessings, especially for our redemption and salvation by His beloved Son, and has been pleased to bless me with excellent parents, a virtuous wife, and with worthy children. His protection has accompanied me through many eventful years, faithfully employed in the service of my country. His providence has not only conducted me to this tranquil situation, but also given me an abundant reason to be contented and thankful. Bless His holy name." John Langdon, another signer of the Constitution, said this: "In the name of God, amen. I, John Langdon, considering the uncertainty of life, and that all appointed unto men, and that is appointed unto all men once to die, do make, ordain, and publish this my last will and testament, in the manner and following that is said. First, I commend my soul to the infinite mercies of God in Christ Jesus, the beloved Son of the Father, who died and rose again, that He might be the Lord of the dead and of the living, professing to believe and hope in the joyful Scripture doctrine of the resurrection to eternal life." These fellows understood. Not only understood, they knew Christ personally. This is what drove them. It was a personal relationship. Not a religion, not man's attempt to be good enough to get into heaven, but a personal relationship with the Son of God. Along with these two, there's numerous other founders who professed Christ as their Savior. John Langdon, a signer of the Constitution. John Jay, first Justice. Now listen, these guys came from very different backgrounds. This is not a denominational issue either. Exclusive of denominations, but they all understood that the life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness can only ultimately be achieved by and with biblical principles. Here's a list of their faiths. Put up that list if you would. Religious affiliations of these guys are summarized up here in this chart. Now this is it's not a conclusive chart. It's not including everybody, but it includes George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Samuel Adams, Benjamin Franklin, John Adams, John Hancock, James Madison, Alexander Hamilton, many more. And you can see their backgrounds. But all of the backgrounds listed here, all of these different denominations professed and believed the same thing about their need of a Savior at that time. They had not gone off on different doctrinal trails. Daniel Webster says this: "Finally, let us not forget the religious character of our origin. Our fathers were brought hither by their high veneration of the Christian religion. They journeyed by its light and labored in its hope. They sought to incorporate its principles with elements of their society and to diffuse its influence through their institutions, civil, politic, and literary." Take that graph down if you would. He went on to say, "If we abide by the principles taught in the Bible, our country will go on prospering and to prosper. But if we in our posterity neglect its instruction, its authority, no man can tell how sudden a catastrophe may overwhelm us or bury all our glory in profound obscurity. And that was 200 years ago. And I'm afraid we're on the precipice of that today. There's been a moral downfall in America. John saw the financial crisis starting to take place in the 70s. May I suggest the spiritual and the moral decline started in the 60s. In 1962 or 3, they took God out of the schools. They would not let us pray anymore. They said you can't have God. There's got to be separation of church and state, which is a misnomer. Thomas Jefferson wrote, as he was an ambassador to France, as they were drawing up the Constitution, he says, listen, we're not going to have in America a state-run religion. We're not going to have the Anglican Church running the things in America. We're going to have separation. There's going to be a church and there's going to be a state. But he did not say that the church had no influence in the state. He said the state had no influence in the church. Big difference. Big difference. We are the thing that began the revolution in America was the Black Robe Regiment. It was the preachers in the 1770s and 1760s that were preaching freedom and liberty and these biblical principles that stirred the hearts of the men to even go out and be part of that revolution. But in the 60s, we took God out of the country, out of the schools. We took prayer out of the schools. In fact, in 1963 or 1964, the Supreme Court of the United States declared secular humanism as a religion, and that's what they teach in the schools today. They teach situation ethics. They teach values clarification. They teach a man-centered religion. They put God away from that. And that has been the moral decline today. That's why our country's gone the way it is. If you can take away God, Stalin said that. You can take away the morality, no rules, no virtue, no thing for your liberty to run by. We can lead people and take away their history. We can lead them anywhere. That's what's happening in America today. Sammy Adams says that if you love wealth, listen very closely. Did you put it up there? No, all right. I'm going to read this twice. If you love wealth greater than liberty, and tranquility of servitude greater than the animated contest for freedom, he said, go home from us in peace. We seek not your counsel nor your arms. Crouch down and lick the hands that feed you. And may posterity forget that ye were our countrymen. We read it again. Sam Adams. If you love wealth, sounds like America, greater than liberty, the tranquility of servitude, greater than the animated contest for freedom, go home from us in peace. We seek not your counsel nor your arms. He says, crouch down and lick the hand that feeds you. And may posterity forget that you are even our countrymen. Oh my goodness. Shouldn't we have that today? So what's the conclusion of the matter? What do we do? Where do we go from here? I want to give you some solutions. I don't want to be like John and just kind of dump you. Well, that's what he's got to do. I mean, there's not much else you can do to get out of debt and do those. So I'll give you some hope. When I say, what do we do today? I mean, our generation. We're at a turning point. Here's the question. Is it to stay the course that's been charted by the secularists, by the globalists, by the socialists? Did you know that we have a socialist running for the presidency of the United States? And do you feel the burn? Might as well call her a socialist in HRC. Is it to change the course of this once great nation with the sheer willpower and the might of man? How have we done with that so far? How have we done with that so far? Or is it to return to the roots and follow the heritage of our father? Will we be humble enough to beseech the one that blessed this nation? Will we take a personal relationship with Jesus Christ like the founders did? It's what drove them. It's what helped them form this nation. It was the principles they learned in the Bible. It was the relationship they had with Jesus. We trust Him who paid the greatest sacrifice for us, not only for our future, but for the future of this one great nation. Abraham Lincoln, on March 30th of 1863, had a proclamation appointing a day of national feast. He said, inasmuch as that we know that by His divine law, nations, like individuals, are subject to punishments and chastisement in this world. Do we not justly fear that awful calamity of the Civil War, which now desolates our land? May it be but a punishment afflicted upon us for our presumptuous sins, to the needful end of the national reformation as a whole people. He says, we've been recipients of the choicest bounties of heaven. We've been preserved these many years in peace and prosperity. We've grown in numbers, grown in wealth, grown in power, as no other nation has ever grown. But we have forgotten God. We have forgotten the gracious hand which preserved us in peace, and multiplied and enriched us and strengthened us. And we have vainly imagined in the deceitfulness of our hearts that all these blessings were produced by some superior wisdom and virtue of our own. Intoxicated with unbroken success, we become too self-sufficient to feel the necessity of the redeeming and preserving grace, too proud to pray to the God that made us. Folks, this is an economic battle. It's a political battle. More than that, it's a spiritual battle. If I look at my Bible right, there's a time coming, and John alluded to it, there's going to be a one-world economy, a one-world religion, a one-world government. And we're heading that way quickly. It's a spiritual battle. It's good against evil. It's the devil against God. It's the devil against his Son. He's doing everything he can to destroy people so they will not accept Christ as their Savior. Everything he can to turn their eyes away from that. He'll keep you busy. And he'll give you circus and bread and make you happy and take your eyes off what's going on. It's happening in the Roman Empire. 2 Chronicles 7:14 says this, if my people, that's Christians, which are called by my name, shall humble themselves and pray and seek my face and humble themselves and turn from their wicked way, then I will hear from heaven and I will forgive their sin and heal their land. Doesn't start in the White House. We start in the State House. I think start in my church house or your church house. Starts with you. Starts with me. What are we going to do? I'm going to quote Sammy Adams one more time. If you love wealth greater than liberty, the tranquility of servitude greater than the animated contest for freedom, go home from us in peace. It's okay. We seek not your counsel, nor your arms. Crouch down. Let the hand that feeds you. May posterity forget that you were even our countrymen. Pretty strong addition, but it's pretty true. 3% of the people fought in the American Revolution. 10% back to 3% that fought. I think there's 3% of Americans willing to fight yet. Is there 10% that's willing to stand up and go along with us? Or will you be the 20% that will side with the Tories, side with the British, or side with this foolish government? Oh my, oh my, 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 oh my, my. So what's the crux of my matter tonight? First of all, I've got a relationship with Jesus Christ. There's two people that have given a great sacrifice for you. It's all the men that died at Concord, that died at all the battles in the Revolution. It's the men that died at Gettysburg. It's the men that died in World War I, the men that died in World War II, the fellows who fought in Vietnam, Iraq, and Iran, and fought in, not Iran, but Afghanistan. Those men gave their life. They gave all. To sacrifice blood so you got freedom to sit in this room tonight. That was for your present. With Jesus Christ died, you have a future. What will you do with them? That's up to you. The Bible says in John 14:6, Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man cometh unto the Father but by me. It's not religion going to get you. It's not baptism that's going to get you there. It's not doing good works that's going to get there. It's only Jesus Christ. John Witherspoon, the Sign of Declaration, said this, and I'll finish with this quote. While we give praise to God, the supreme disposer of all events, for his inner disposition on our behalf, let us guard against the dangerous error of trusting in or boasting of an arm of flesh. If your cause is just, if your principles are pure, and if your conduct is prudent, you need not fear the multitude of opposing hosts. What follows from this, he said, that he is the best friend to American liberty, who is most sincere and active in promoting the true and undefiled religion, who sets himself with the greatest firmness to bear down profanity and immorality of every kind. Turn on your TV and you see that right away. He goes on to finish with this. Whosoever is an avowed enemy of God, I scruple not to call him an enemy of this country. Thank you very much.
tough to beat that. Oh, wait, if anybody needs to stand up, stretch,